how the purpose of yours looks in action.
In my career many years ago, where I was feeling so disconnected from my life, I literally just heard you should look into hypnotherapy. It just absolutely opened the floodgates of subconscious work.
Hi everyone, my name is Margarita Graf, and this is Purpose in Action, a podcast for anyone who's been feeling the pull towards something more, but doesn't quite know how to trust it yet. Today, I'm talking with Jenna Borrelli, a creative wellness educator, somatic hypnotherapist, and artist who believes that it is safe to express who you truly are. Her story is one of those that reminds you that your path doesn't have to look like anyone else's, and that healing can come in the most unexpected forms. So let's get into it. Hi, Jenna. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's such an honor to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. And so let's start from where are you based and what does your life look like right now in this season?
It's a great question. So I'm currently based in Chicago, Illinois, and I really love living here because we are a very seasonal city and a very seasonal state. And I find that my life really matches those energetic changes. And I love that we're recording this during the summer solstice weekend, if you're aware of that as well. So I'm definitely in this feeling of blossoming, of waking up, of sort of revving the engine, but also feeling really grounded, connected, and solar charged. So kind of a lot of fun, different energies right now.
Yeah, I guess it's a blooming season.
Yes, exactly. It's blooming season.
Great. So, creative wellness educator, somatic hypnotherapist, artist, inner child practitioner, sober bestie, you contain multitudes. So if you had to describe what you actually do in one breath from inside out, how would you put it? How the purpose of yours looks in action?
That's a great question. And sometimes it's challenging to put it all in an elevator pitch that's cohesive. But if I had to really strip down all of the work, I would say at its core, I am an embodiment doula. I basically help people go through the process of embodiment of like full system, full creative embodiment, whether that's through the modalities of inner child work, somatic hypnotherapy, creative wellness. And I really look at it as that ethos. It's safe to express yourself as sort of like the way to capture it all. Because there's a lot of somatic dissonance when we are learning how to take up space, right? You feel it in your body, you feel it in your subconscious mind in the way that you show up. And so it's helping folks really learn how to dive into that embodied work and then talk the talk and walk the walk.
Wow, that sounds very impressive. I love that you touched already the topic about subconscious. We're going to talk more about it.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I love it so much myself. So how did you get here? So not as a resume, the real story, what happened that you said, oh, this is my path?
Yeah, so I had a very interesting hit of intuition when I started to really like dive into this world. So my background outside of this work is marketing and consulting, and I do that still, and I've been doing that for a long time. And I was at a point in my career many years ago where I was feeling so disconnected from my life, and I was feeling exhausted, and I was dealing with people pleasing, and I was overworking, and I was just absolutely maxed out of capacity. And I was sitting in the dark in my living room table in one of my old apartments in Chicago. I was like sitting in the dark, like just thinking, and all of this sudden I had this voice. It was my voice, but it was not, right? It was my greater self or my higher self or true self coming in. And I literally just heard, you should look into hypnotherapy. And I was like, what? Okay. Like, that's so random. And at this point in time, I was already getting involved with sobriety. So I was learning about sobriety and I was doing other kinds of wellness coaching. I was focusing primarily on journaling and working with artists in that capacity, but I really wasn't like fully sinking my teeth in yet. And so I had this hit of, you should look into hypnotherapy. And I was already following Grace Smith, if you're familiar with her. She's a hypnotherapist. Yeah,
Of
she's
course.
great. Yes, right. And I was already following her. I've been following her on Facebook and Instagram and other accounts for years. And I looked at her, one of her profiles, and it was like, hey, we have a training. It's starting in a couple weeks. It's self-paced, but also part of a cohort. And this is the investment. And it was not necessarily on paper a rational choice. There wasn't anything like inherently irrational. I wasn't putting myself into like debt, or I wasn't doing anything that was going to harm myself, but it wasn't really like a very linear progression at that time. But something about it, I just like couldn't stop thinking about it. And so I signed up for hypnotherapy school. And from that point, it just absolutely opened the floodgates of subconscious work, inner child work, somatic work, safety in the body, like all of this creative embodied work. And from there, I just kept peeling more layers of myself and being like, well, what if I learn yoga? What if I learn breath work? What if I learn like cooking coach? And so I like to think of it as sort of like a Pokemon collecting journey. I'm like, okay, what's the next like wellness Pokemon I can connect? And yeah, so that was sort of the thread of it all, was this breaking point of disconnect. I really was not happy with my life. And my intuition said, why don't we learn how to get to the root of that and how to help other people get to the root of that? So that was kind of where that initial thread started. And part of the reason I could get there is because I chose to become sober. And I think if I had not become sober, I would not have actually had the clarity to get to the next step. So they were really complementary in those experiences. And now we're here and we're talking. And it's just so interesting seeing the way that every domino falls over. And I know you have a similar experience of just kind of like following the nonlinear path and like not like doing things that maybe don't make sense on paper, but have led you where you are today, which is so fun.
Yeah, I literally had chills because the moment you said how your voice told you, oh, hypnotherapy, this is it. So I had kind of the same thing, but before that, I've been digging for years.
Yeah.
So as I've been sharing before in my channel, so I had Lyme disease and that was crazy. Back in 2016, I went to Philippines, and after even 9 months, no one couldn't tell what actually going on. And I realized that the traditional medicine couldn't really help fast. And I started learn everything about subconscious mind. So, and I've been already discovering this chapter for years, and I was able to help myself, to help others, but I didn't consider it as a full-time job. And I've been also working in the marketing on that time. I used to work for startups back home in Moscow.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, and then I moved to the United States and I started over my corporate job again. But then I felt that something is really missing and my soul was hurting, I would say, you know? And then I was like, okay, that's the time. It seems like I'm already running around a lot, so trying to find this path. And I started reading like spiritual books. The first one was what really resonated with me, Autobiography of Yogi.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's a great book. I haven't read it yet, but it's on the list.
Yeah. And you know, this book coming always right on time. I know it's one of the favorite Steve Jobs book. So yeah, if it comes, it's not by the accident, and sometimes it takes years for people to reading it.
Mm-hmm.
So, because it's kind of sounds complicated, but whenever the time is right, even in the book, they say, whenever you're ready, the teacher is always ready for you. You have to be ready for it.
Yes.
So I'm like, okay, but how it could help myself to start helping others, and I couldn't find it. And then I remember I went to Joshua Tree. I did myself a little retreat,
Mm.
was just like, connecting with the nature. And then as soon as I got back to LA, I used to live in LA on that time. I'm like, it just clicked, I don't know, in a second. I was like, okay, I'm super confident about the thing that I would like to work with subconscious mind 100%. And I was like, okay, well, what could be the best tool for me? Because I didn't want to associate myself as a healer on that time or speaking out loud about those things. And I'm like, okay, I need to find something more human oriented.
Yeah.
So, and I was like, okay, hypnotherapy. And I remember how in 2016, it was really hard to me to find hypnotherapists for me.
Mm-hmm.
And social media wasn't that great back on that year. So, and I was like, okay, I'll put in search if I can learn it from somebody. And I found my teacher right away. So he's originally from Ukraine, but he used to be educated here and also in Germany. And I was like, oh, this is great. And his system was perfect because you have to jump on the practice right away with the small, small steps. But I think that was really helpful to me, because first I was afraid because it was a lot of profound practitioners already learning from him, everybody from different levels. But then by the end of the Zoom, it was online. By the end of the Zoom, he was just pretty much splitting everybody by rooms, and we were practicing with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that was great. So I was able to heal myself a lot. So when you're constantly being conscious, I would say it just could not work. It could
Right.
just not, like, there is no way it's not going to help you. So, and when you're feeling it yourself with your body, with your mind, you have this courage to share this with others. So, and I was simply just speaking about this in my stories, and people were just coming. I didn't
Yeah.
really do much about it. So yeah, that's how I found the path of hypnotherapy.
That's awesome. Yeah, it definitely comes to you. Like that's what I've heard from everyone. It just falls in your lap and it doesn't make sense, but it does make sense. And I have chronic illness myself, so I understand that feeling of like wanting to take health into your own matters and see where your personal accountability lies. Like, obviously, if something happens to you, it's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong, but it is your choice and your decision on how do you like fix that problem or how do you approach it. And that's like for me, compassion is a really big part of my practice because I don't do well with like tough love. Like sometimes I need a little. Like we're in a season right now. I need a little like butt kicking from myself, but like in a nice, gentle way. So I feel like that's where like the inner child work is really helpful too, because it's like, how can you reparent yourself without maybe causing more harm, maybe learning the balance between like discipline and devotion and compassion and all of that. So, but I love your story too. I think that's awesome that you just dove right into it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So yeah, I'm finding a lot of similarities, and I think it's very interesting. And that was also the biggest desire of mine, to be around like-minded people so we can talk about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And also the topic of sobriety is really interested to me because when I stepped into a spiritual path, that was also clicking in me. And it is a big part of your story and your identity. Sober bestie is right there in how you introduce yourself in the social media. How did that thread weave into your work as a healer and artist?
Yeah. So I always had a very strong identity with alcohol. Like it was very much part of who I was. I had this thought I can only create if I'm drunk or if I'm drinking. And, there's many famous writers from the past who their whole shtick was, I get wasted and I write. And like that was cool to me. Like I was like, oh yeah, it's so cool, right? And I also was in a punk rock band for many years in my early 20s. So that was super fun. So I was all kind of about like being very expressive and experimental, and there's all these forces kind of happening, but I always really felt strongly with my identity with drinking. It was something I did. I was someone who liked to drink a lot. I was someone who drank in a lot of situations, and it was very much tied to my creative identity and my public identity. And for the most part, I was able to show on the outside that I had it under control, but I absolutely did not. Like on the inside, I was suffering. I was waking up feeling like literal garbage every single day of my life. I was, not doing well with work. Like I was struggling with my relationships. And so finally it got to the point where I felt like I was genuinely dying, like not in a health way, but more like a soul way. Like I really felt like I was dying, like my soul was dying. And I was getting to the absolute breaking point. And I finally decided, I was like, one of these things has to go. It's either going to be like my human self or this habit. Like it really got to the point where I felt like I couldn't live like that anymore. And so I'm a very like sentimental person. I like special dates. I love the solstice. I love the equinox. I really resonate with calendar dates that are special and magical. So for me, my sobriety date is January 1st, 2021. That's the first day I stopped drinking alcohol. And I went out with a bang. I got really drunk the night before, and I was like, I know tomorrow is going to be the first of the last. And so I just kind of like went out with it. I made it like a ritual in a way. And I woke up that morning and it was the beginning of the end and the start of, this new chapter. And so, if I had not stopped drinking, I don't know where my life would be. I don't think I would be sitting here genuinely in this exact moment in my life. And so that was the biggest domino that had to fall. And then everything else kind of fell into place after that. I even like tell my husband, I'm like, I don't think we would have met if I'd never stopped drinking, or if we had met, this would not have worked out. So it's really like, it's truly such a pivotal point of my sort of like rebirth. And I'm a Scorpio rising, so there's a lot of like rebirth in my life. Like I have a lot of Scorpio placements. I'm also a Cancer, so I'm really emotional and I'm very like transformative. So for me, that was like a huge ego transformation. And as a result, I started to work more with sober communities in my local community in Chicago, online. And I really wanted to share with people that if alcohol isn't serving you anymore, you can find ways to change. Like you genuinely can change the behavior. And what I found for me, alcohol was a mask. It was a mask of feeling unworthy, of feeling unconfident, of feeling like I didn't like myself because of experiences that I had. And so with that removing of that huge mask, I was like, wait, I want to like myself. I do like myself. Okay, what is going on here? And so it really was like this like coming home to self experience where I was like, wait, I care about myself. I want to feel better. One of the things that I teach with my coaching is the concept of like self-reverence. So there's like a hierarchy. There's self-acceptance, there's self-confidence and self-compassion, and then there's self-reverence. And that's like the top of the pyramid. And when you have self-reverence, you are actually like considering yourself as the highest level of respect. And like that is sort of how I ascend my own kind of like journey, is like I want to put myself on a pedestal. Like I want to be pedestaled. I want to be the most important person in my life so that I can actually serve people better and I can serve myself. And so with removing alcohol, I learned how to like care for myself first. And I became a better person for everyone else in my life. And I was actually able to connect with people versus connecting through a mask. So when I call myself a sober bestie. I want it to be very like approachable. I want sobriety to be very approachable with of course the boundary of I'm not, like an alcohol sponsor, or I'm not like a therapist in that regard. So it's interesting seeing the ways that like companionship can help people with sobriety too, right? Just like having someone you can talk to and someone you can relate to. And as a result, I've made a lot of really great friends and we're part of this community, and it's great to see like what we can do outside of that world.
Wow, that's really great. And thank you so much for bringing this up today. And I think that how you describe this top level of the pyramid is the level where you recognize that your body is actually your temple and you have to worship
Yes.
it, right? In the right
Yes.
way.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that resonates a lot. I remember it wasn't really my conscious choice, or it wasn't really my top goal, I would say, when COVID hit. So it was 2020, and I remember I was trying to, entertain myself in a new ways at home. So, and I was waking up so early, even though I'm not really early bird. I love
Yes.
sleep a lot. So, and I remember how I used to go to the ocean to Santa Monica with no traffic at 6 a.m. in the morning. So, and I remember one morning I was like, okay, I was meditating and I was like, okay, how about if I'm gonna just try fasting for, I don't know, 40 days or something? Because in Russian Orthodox Church is pretty common thing once in a year, but I never tried it because I wasn't
Right.
really religious, never. So, and I was like, okay, how about I just try it? Because for me, it was a big of challenge to not like eat meat, I would
Yeah.
say. I was like, okay, it's just fasting. It's not going to be forever, because it was really hard to give such a big commitment to myself. So, and I tried it, and I remember there were weeks you can eat fish or something. So I didn't really want to, and I remember how the last week was already about to end, and I was like, I don't want to go back to it, And of course, I was not drinking on that time.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, I can handle this a bit more, a bit more, a bit more. So, and it's been already 2 years since I finished reading that book about autobiography of yogi. So, and I had this feeling, oh, I want to find my teacher. I had this calling on that time, and I couldn't find anybody from that lineage for 2 years. So, and after I gave up those things, I found my teacher right away. It
Amazing.
was it was actually, it happened overnight or something, I remember that very clearly. And I started learning Atma Kriya yoga online, but you have to be initiated in person eventually. And one of the points to be on that path is to be sober, actually. And that wasn't my goal because, those are like very profound practices and you have to handle this.
Right.
And because, lots of purifications are coming over, and so it is very emotional, and your body have to also process all of those things. And I remember how I started chanting the mantra, and that was the moment when I was like, okay, I'm taking a long break with all of those things. Right now, I'm not that strict anymore about it, but it's not definitely a part of my life, I would say. Because as you said before, it had very bad and very big influence into my life. As of right now, it's not. I also went through this path and it was really helpful to find myself again, I would say.
Yeah, it's like an initiation. You're going through different initiations. And I would say too, there are people in my life who have healthy relationships with alcohol. And I have respect for that. I think everything in moderation, everything in your own, it goes back to knowing yourself, right? And in those moments, you were like, oh, I don't know why I'm doing this, but I feel called to do it. And it's like that whisper, and which is a great, reminder of using things like meditation to help like level set you and like help you access all of that, or just being silent. I think we don't live in a very quiet society. We live in a very loud society. And I think removing alcohol and removing, like, maybe you do like a vegan cleanse, or you do an animal free cleanse or whatever. Or for me, I don't smoke weed anymore because it was affecting my brain. It was
Mm-hmm.
affecting my mental health. So like for me, it was another initiation. And like you keep peeling layers. And as you peel those layers, you get access to new things. And that's amazing. That's how you met your guru and you were able to be initiated into this really amazing spiritual practice where you're able to access more and more and become more and more of who you are.
Exactly, exactly. And, people often think that spiritual path, it's all about, those sensations and just, beautiful feelings. It is about beautiful feelings and it's all about love, but love sometimes might act in a different ways and you have to welcome every single face, I would say.
Yes, absolutely.
And and when your mind is not clear, it's just hard to handle it. It's just
Mm-hmm.
hard to face who you truly are because we're not just, you know, showing up nice. As you mentioned a lot about the mask we're wearing,
Yeah.
right? Behind
Mm-hmm.
all of that and beneath those layers, there are also a lot of feelings we would not usually face, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we have to. And this process could be not really funny, but we have to go through it, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. So at some point, I was going to say before you even mentioned that story that you went through something to helping others, and now you're helping them to go through it. What was the transition like? When did you realize this was your calling? So after you're already purified yourself, and then you recognize, okay, this is it.
Yeah, I have always had this helper drive. When I was younger and in and out of my 20s, I worked in the service industry. Like I was a waitress or a barista. So I've always kind of had that like helping hand service desire. Um, when I was younger, I was like a church goer. So I did a lot with church service. And so there was always this thread of I really enjoyed connecting with other people and working in marketing. There can be an aspect of service in that as well. But when it came to the world of what I do today and that progression to what I do today, I realized that as I was learning more and more about these tools and helping myself, I started to identify versions of myself that exist in the world and faces of myself. And I really do feel like we are all mirrors in a way, right? We are mirroring each other, we're mirroring each other's experiences, each other's shadows, and mirroring contrast as well. So if we see things we don't like in other people, that might be the contrast that, right? But at the same time, we are all more connected than I think we always like to admit.
100%.
Right. It's like there's a lot more in common we have with each other. But I realized that as I learned more and more stories about the people I was working with, I saw more of myself and I saw more of versions of myself from the past. And so I really looked through the lens of what are these commonalities that people are experiencing as a collective. And a lot of it was around worth and expression and um, really, our brains are very creative when it comes to self-sabotage. And our brains are really creative when it comes to shame. And if we can be creative about the things we don't want, can we be creative about the solutions? And that's kind of where this all threaded together. And so I really wanted to be a voice that was different than a lot of like the traditional self-help. A lot of it is like pull yourself up from your bootstraps and like cut everything off and do all these things. And I think there's a time and place for those types of tools. Obviously if they're popular they do help people, but for me I needed something a little bit more flowy and creative and a little more meet me where I'm at. And so I would say the types of clients I work with, there is a level of expectation, there is a level of accountability that is required to work with me. but that is also an accountability and a requirement in myself. And so like
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not keeping that expectation with myself, how can I expect my clients? And so it is this very like dynamic exchange of like, I'm showing up today. I want you guys to show up too with these sessions, with these programs, with these workshops.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Understanding that there are going to be emotions, there's going to be difficult things, and it's like you can show up, you don't have to be perfect, you don't have to have a face on, you can cry. I cry all the time, I encourage it, you know. Actually, one of the things that we learned in hypnotherapy school that Grace Smith would always say is tears are transformation, and I love that, and that's such like a safe way to express
I
yourself.
had to learn it myself. I couldn't
Yes.
do that before.
Right. And there's so much shame around crying, and it's a cultural shame. There's, you know, as females, as women, we're told don't cry, don't be emotional, whatever. I was told that. So
And
I
then we
had a lot
learn
of,
how to be emotional.
exactly, exactly. So it's so interesting how all these things kind of come out, whether we want them to or not. But I really do look at working with people who are aware of the problem. I think that there are people that help you find the problem, and then there's people who help you dig below it. And that's what you and I do with hypnotherapy, right? Like typically our clients know the surface level problem. It's like, but there's something else at the bottom of the iceberg.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting when you hear someone come in for one thing and then they come out saying, oh, okay, so this is like I was 7 years old and someone
Always.
like, and you're like, oh my gosh, okay, so that's why you can't write today, right? Or it's always so interesting to see the thread between the surface and the deeper.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I love how you brought this up, how we're all connected. That's
Yeah.
actually so funny. I stopped talking about Hinduism maybe a couple of years ago. And today it was just like, a lot of flashbacks. And I can explain that from subconscious state point, right? And also why I love Hinduism so much and why it just like started resonate a lot because they're also explaining how our soul levels are all connected, and to make sure you go through your mission, you have to have other atmas around you, other souls, right?
Yeah.
So, and with the subconscious mind, we're also finding anyhow that we're all connected, and there's like a lot of cases where people are coming and struggling. They could be angry of somebody, but then when they recognize the purpose of those actions, and that it's actually their choice, and they just have to go through it to learn. And then when they can recognize love in those actions, that's actually great. And I think this is the point where the healing also comes. You already described a little bit a picture of your client, but who comes to you these days? Because you went through a lot, and you said as you're digging deeper, then you're kind of bringing to your space like-minded people with something maybe you went through, or at some point you're going through it. So paint the picture of the person who finds their way into your world. What are they carrying? What they have already tried before, let's say. What are they really looking for?
Yeah. I work very often with neurodivergent sensitive souls. And that's because I am a neurodivergent sensitive soul. So it's like, again, really the mirror, real the connective tissue of our experiences, but absolutely folks that feel a lot. Folks that feel a lot in the body, feel a lot in their aura, in their sort of energetic field. A lot of the people I work with are former people pleasers, or people that kind of put away their own desires to overserve others or to make themselves small. Um, and I work with a lot of people who have dreams outside of what their day-to-day life is. So maybe they are working in the field of their dreams, but they're just not seeing life the way they want it. Or maybe they're looking for a soul partnership, or maybe they're looking for creative opportunities. They want to write more. They want to create more. So pretty much a requirement, not unofficial. I'll work with everyone that, is willing to learn, but almost everyone I work with has some kind of artist drive, some kind of creative drive. I also believe that everyone can be an artist. So like that kind of casts the net wide, right? But really consistently, the clients that I work with, I would say like the two main themes are like emotional suppression and creative desire. And those play really interesting together. And like an example of emotional expression is drinking and drinking too much, or maybe spending too much time on social media, or maybe, getting into unhealthy relationships where you make yourself smaller instead of making yourself big with your art, making that music, making that painting, making that writing. And I have clients that come to me and they say, I know that I'm meant to do this thing. I know it consciously. I can tell you, I want to write this book. I want to finish this piece of work. I want to be a musician, but I just can't get myself to do it consistently. And so we dig, and we dig compassionately and gently, right? We're not, jamming our shovels in, right? We need to be delicate about it, but we learn that there is a feeling of shame and unworthiness and like lack of confidence that sort of lives at the under the surface level. And I have a friend who also is a big fan of like hypnotherapy and creative coaching, and she kind of refers to it as like subconscious brain surgery, which is so fun. And so you're kind of going in and you're like, let me tweak this belief, let me tweak this thing. And but as we are talking to the parts of us that are feeling unworthy, the inner child, the 7-year-old self, we're going in with the energy of, I love you. Thank you for what you did, right? Because as you know, our subconscious mind wants to protect us, and it is designed to protect us and does a dang good job of protecting us to the point where we're like, okay, no more protecting. Let me You're right. You're like, enough. So, and that's where like, I think teaching people how to discern their intuition versus their anxiety, and teaching people how to take risks that are not too like dysregulating. And so it really is building safety for the change and building the bridge from the current state to the new state. So those are the type of people. They are dynamic, they are creative, they are sensitive, and they are willing to make changes, and they're willing to be vulnerable. And that's hard, right? The last piece, willing to be vulnerable. And as you know, like we are both in a healing field, we're both in a service field. It can sometimes be hard to say, I'm a helper and I need help. But like going back to what you said about us being conscious, collection, and being souls that are meant to be around each other, we need each other. We need each other to support. And it's so important that we are open to that. And so like for me, I work with coaches. I also see a mental health therapist. I have a dietitian. Like I'm seeing all these people to help me with the things that like I know I need support. And that's where it's like hypnotherapy, creative coaching, embodiment coaching, confidence coaching, all of these things are so important for us to be willing to go through.
Totally agree. And I'm always saying, for example, the dentist, so they don't treat their teeth by themselves, right? So you're going to somebody else. And as a hypnotherapist, I've also learned, because at the beginning I was thinking, I'm going to learn all of those things and I'm going to practice those myself. And my teacher, he used to say, yeah, of course, some of the tools you can use as a self-hypnosis, right? But in the most of the ways, your subconscious will protect you. And this information, which breaks people's minds all the time, I think the recognition of this is already the huge part of the healing, because normally we don't know. So we're just like acting as two separate operations, our subconscious and conscious, but we have to understand it's just like protecting us, because it's recognizing something known as a safety, even if it's bad, as a human mind can recognize that it's bad. And as you said, that to attain a sort of level of our real identity and to live our purpose every day, we have to connect with others. This is 100%. And the way how people are mirroring us in a good and a bad way, it's just like the world of duality of our mind.
Yeah.
So this is actually all necessary,
Yeah,
I'd say. So, and it's
absolutely.
all not happening by the accident. I think that's also one of the frustrating realization my clients get, that whatever they're experiencing now, it is outcome of their actions and it is actually their choice. It could be not
Yes.
conscious, but
Mm-hmm.
they're like, no, I don't want to, I didn't want to. Yeah, maybe you don't want to have this consciously now, but how about back on the time? So
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
laughing at you. I'm laughing because
No, yeah, I get it.
you get it now and you understand it. It's like, I don't want to do this. Yes, sadly you do. Like, and that's something like I recognize I have a habit that I'm trying to break. And I had a moment and I'm like, I'm sick of my own shit. Like I'm actually like,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and sometimes it takes you being so frustrated, but it's accountability.
mm-hmm,
Like I
mm-hmm.
dug this grave, I gotta get out. Like I gotta, so I think when people actually recognize that there is a desire for their unwanted habit, it clicks and it's like, wait,
Yeah.
I don't actually want that anymore. And being, we're almost like guides, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
not enacting the change on them. We are facilitating the space. We're creating the area for them to be the ones actually making the change and creating that environment for change.
Exactly. And I think it's also really hard for people who are generally having very strong willpower, but something
Yes.
doesn't work anymore. And I was one of them, and I'm still sometimes, because as you go deeper, you're finding more layers. And also, I'm one of these people who are very sensitive in the terms of their body. So my
Yeah.
body reacts right away. And
Hmm.
that was always like that. When I just became an adult, I just forgot about this. But with the hypnotherapy, thankfully, I was able to remember a lot of episodes when I was not be able to connect as a child that, oh,
Right.
okay, I had this, I had like the pain in my stomach, for example, because those episodes happened or something like that, right? So, and somatic hypnotherapy is something most people haven't experienced. Can you walk us through what actually happens, what it feels like from the inside, and why the body is the entry point?
Yeah, absolutely. So our bodies are also these really intelligent systems that we know a lot about, but we don't know a lot about, right? Like we're still learning a lot about like connective tissue and fascia and all of those wonderful things. And so the somatic approach is learning the wiring of our body and learning the way that our emotional experiences relate to the wiring. So a lot of times we are anxious because we feel it in our body first. And a lot of the clues that we get about our sensational feelings are through the body. And so, what somatic hypnotherapy does, it helps you build a clearer bridge between the sensation, the connection of the subconscious mind and the body. And so, when you are experiencing a challenge that you want to solve, let's say it's creative block, or let's say it's motivation, what hypnotherapy, somatic hypnotherapy does, it says, where do I feel this disconnect in the body? Where do I feel the sensation in the body? And then what is the story? And so it's finding a way to match the sensation with the story, and then also learning how to create new sensations and new stories. And I really do believe traditional hypnotherapy is very somatic. There's a lot of somatic pieces. There's breath work, there's anchoring, there's memory cueing and all of that. And so where I take it a step further is I do a lot of grounding with breath work. Like that's a really big piece of what I do, and journeying through breath work, as well as allowing you to move the body during the session. There's a lot of body movement, a lot of movement at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of the session and at the end. And so it's really developing a greater intelligence of the language of your body and knowing the language
Yes.
of your body. And this is something we also experience, especially the female body, is we're told to ignore those cues and to ignore those sensations. And, you know, even stories with chronic health, like there's always a seed of where that starts and there's
Yeah.
always a seed of that sensation. And so you might find that your body is holding on to chronic stress because it is a protection from something. And maybe there was a moment in your childhood or your adulthood even, right? Not everything is childhood, but a lot of it is. And that's where it goes back to the protection. A lot of how we feel is based off of that protection that we're kind of bracing for. So
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of it is building safety in the body. And when we have safety in the body, we're able to express. And when we're able to express, we're able to be our most creative selves. And we're able to be our most creative selves, we get our work done. We finish our projects. We share it with the
Yeah.
world. And so it's kind of like a beautiful progression of entry to expression.
Yeah, because I think in a lot of cases, it actually protects us from beautiful things, but
Yeah.
our minds is just like not going that way. And as you've also mentioned something about the reprogramming. So I remember how I first tried it myself and I was like, oh, I'm gonna reprogram everything right now. And then I was like, no, yeah, I'm considering us as a codes, as a computers, right?
Yes.
But we're co-creators, I would say,
Yes.
before, because it doesn't mean you would just do everything in once. As I
Mm-hmm.
said, like layers are coming over. But I think it is a beautiful journey. For example, I remember how I had a fear when we were driving fast because of the certain circumstances happened before, right, in my life. And I remember how my solar plexus area was reacting so badly. But during the session, we were not even touching this topic. We were going back to what actually happened
Yeah.
originally, I would say. And even though I'm a practitioner myself, when I'm going with my own shit to dive deeper with that, I'm not believing never ever that my body could be different, because
Right.
this connection with body and mind is already automation and you got used
Mm-hmm.
to it. And I was so shocked when the next time we were driving, and that was kind of the situation when we were getting close to another car, and my mind was already expecting. And now I
Mm-hmm.
was shocking, not because of the situation, but because my body didn't give me an impulse I
Yeah.
got used to. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this is something different. And I was many stories like that. And this is truly life-changing experience.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. And as you were sharing that story, it made me think about the breath as sort of an interrupter. And in some of those situations, before the body gets the chance to react, if we can take a breath, if we can interrupt with the breath. So it's also teaching that kind of new cue of, oh, I think I'm going to react to something. What if I breathe it first and then see? And again, we don't want to bypass our natural human emotions. We're always going to have emotions, and I hope we do. I want people to be able to express them, but it's less about, you know, expecting impact and more like, okay, how can I be in control of my response so that I can
mhm.
take care of myself and do it in a way that isn't harming myself more.
I love how you're describing this conscious breathing, because
Yeah.
to me, for some reason, I had the most resistance in all of those practices I went through with the breath work.
Yes.
So, and I also had crazy allergic asthma, so it was really
Mm.
hard to me.
Hmm.
So, but when you actually going to it, it just helps a lot, because the mind, I guess, also recognize that, oh, this is something really simple, and my issue is that big, it's just not gonna help. So, and then you're just starting practicing it and you're like, oh my gosh, this is also life changing tool. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing this. And I guess I'm gonna ask you more about your tools. You also
Mhm.
bringing in creativity and art, as you said. You want to do that in a creative way. So let's talk about art, journaling, expression in any other ways. So why is that part of healing for you? What does creativity unlock that talking alone can't?
Yeah. Art is a genuinely subconscious process too. The expression of art really taps into the symbols, the archetypes, the emotions, and sometimes we don't have words for an experience or we don't have words that we're communicating out. And so it's finding other ways to express it. And even if it is vocal art, like maybe it's singing, maybe it's acting, maybe it's writing a script, but there's still sort of like a gear shift from I'm talking about my problems to I'm finding a way to get them out of the head and into an art form. Um, so my pretty much daily non-negotiable is I journal every day. That's like a really important part of my like creative, spiritual embodiment practice. And then I try to make art as much as possible. I write a lot and I let it be a space to dump and then later decipher. I think that's like a really healthy practice to just kind of like get it out and then figure it out later and decipher later. But I do find that sometimes things like perfectionism and criticism come into my art. So I have to remind myself that not all art pieces have to be polished, not all art pieces have to be presentable. And like off camera, I have a huge stack of art pieces that are just like, I'm not going to say garbage because it's important to me, but nothing that I'm hanging up, nothing that I'm sharing, but equally valuable work because it helped me get something out. It's almost um, like a gunk remover. You're getting that stuff out. And so yeah, creativity is a really, really important part of my personal practice and the practice with my clients, but also if you can, using your hands is so powerful. It's a very powerful somatic practice. And as you can, for those watching, I talk with my hands a lot. Like I am a hand
Yeah.
talker, which I think is very funny, and I don't even notice it. And then I'm like, oh, here I go. But if I'm feeling stressed, I like to bake. I like to knead dough. I like to make meatballs. Like anything that's kind of like touching my hands. Um, or I like to work with clay in an artist way. So there's so many ways that the hands are kind of a channel for that work as well. And being able to use
Mhm.
your hands helps you get out of your head as well. So there's so many different avenues to distill what's going on upstairs into the world and into a somatic and creative process.
That's great. That's great. And I'm also finding journaling as a very powerful tool. And I think it's very underestimated
Yes.
because, I'm also teaching how to reprogram your subconscious. And we're going through the fourth stages or phases, right?
Mhm.
And it helps a lot. It helps a lot to let go of things, to recognize the root, to
Mhm.
actually find from this state of mind what you actually want,
Yes.
and then to make sure you claim it, to make sure you understand that now it's yours. It's not just, the fantasy of your mind. And as you explained, when you're writing it down, you're pretty much done loading it. You don't have to even
Yes.
make any decisions right now, but you just empty yourself a little more because those are
Yeah.
just like crazy. My mind is literally monkey brain mind, just
Yes.
jumping all over all
Same.
the time. And as
Yeah.
you said, it's a very important part of your life. It is mine as well. I'm journaling every day, even though I've been practicing it for years. Now I'm not doing it just to gain a benefit.
Right.
It just, I'm enjoying this process.
Yeah.
And also, how you gave a great example to do something with your hands.
Hmm.
I've also found a really great tool. When was it? Like maybe 3 years ago. I don't know if you heard about it. It's neurographic designs.
Hmm. Yeah.
This is very great. And this is super accessible, even if you never, ever done with that. So you can just, type it in the YouTube and they can teach you how to do that. This is really amazing. And when you're doing it for the first time, you're not expecting much and you're like, okay, those are just lines. Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm just, making up my mind to do something and focus on something for a while, right? But it's actually very gentle tool how you can also
Mm.
rewire your neurons. And wow, and it's also, I guess, science proved or whatever. I'm not really
Yeah.
focusing and looking just for science proof things,
Right.
but I know that for some people it's very important. So yeah, I love all of those little helpers of our lives, I would
Yeah.
say. So, and I also wanted you to ask about corporate wellness too. You work in a corporate wellness, bringing this into workplaces and speaking engagements. What does that world need from what you do, and why does it matter there specifically?
Yeah. I really got into corporate and workplace wellness as a way to show up more as myself and to help similar type of people. A lot of neurodivergent folks struggle in the workplace because they don't feel like they can show up like themselves, and there aren't always the tools and accommodations. And getting more involved in corporate and workplace wellness allowed me to create a space for similar folks to come and explore safe expression, but also to help people be less stressed at work and less invested in the chaos. I think a lot of people put their identity with, I have to work hard, I have to work a lot, I have to prove myself. And while I think it's important to care about your work and to show up to the best of your ability, it's also important to care for yourself and your vessel. And I see it a lot where I have coworkers who don't ever take time off, or coworkers who work over their lunch break, or are answering emails at night and have no boundaries. And a lot of the work that I like to teach is how to set better boundaries at work, how to take breaths, how to meditate, how to fit a 5 minute meditation into your workday, how to use your lunch break to help regulate yourself, bring yourself back to center. And all of these pieces allow people to take their masks off a little bit more and more in the corporate space and the workplace. And as a result, I do believe it fosters a community and a culture where people are more expressive and they're more creative, and they don't feel like they have to mince their words and mince everything they say. There's obviously a level of professionalism that is required, but I do really think that being authentic is valuable. And I would say I'm I don't ever work in any kind of environment where I can't be myself. Like there's a level of professionalism that I will always uphold, but I do like to be who I am, and I like to show up like myself. And if I can help others do the same, I just know that those environments are going to be better. We're going to work harder, or we're going to work more efficiently. We're going to work more intentionally, and we're going to actually be happy to be at work.
I love that. I love that because I was also trying to combine this in my workplace,
Yeah.
in my leadership, and to create this kind of, connection between my managers so they can teach their employees in that way as well. And I wish for every single corporate to have a person like that,
Yes.
to make it a little bit more meaningful. Because as you said, whenever you're holding this space when everybody can just express themselves as they are, and if they are in their place and making their role more efficient, so
Mm-hmm.
this is just a great and healthy environment.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
So I also wanted to ask you, is there were a moment or a session with a client that stayed with you, and it was reminding you exactly why you do this?
So one of my very first clients after hypnotherapy school was kind of like truly one of the best sessions I've ever had. And it's amazing how it was so fresh from school. And I had a client that had inexplainable nausea. Like she was not super nauseous and anxious, and she couldn't figure it out. She went to a GI doctor, she went to a mental health therapist, she went to all these different practitioners, and they just said, everything looks fine. You're normal. Everything looks good. And we did 3 sessions together. And by the third session, she realized that she was holding in her stomach emotional pain because of her dog that died. And she didn't realize, which, as you know, animals are just brought on this world to bring us so much joy and comfort and to really be part of our soul journey. But for her, she hadn't realized that this passing of her animal was affecting her so deeply. And so at once she gave herself permission to grieve the passing of her animal, her dog, and to recognize that he will always be part of her life and she's allowed to grieve him and she's allowed to care deeply. That was like our last session. And then I took a break from taking clients like right after I saw her, and I reached out to her and I said, "Hey, how are you? Is there anything I can do?" And she's like, the nausea's gone. It's gone. And like, I'm able to be myself. And as you know, Margarita, it's always such a privilege when a client says they don't need to come back. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, it's such a different perspective in our industry where you're like, obviously I want to see my clients as long as they
I
need
love
me.
that.
Yeah, right. And you're like, okay, bye. Like, you know, feel free to come back if you need some maintenance, but it is really
Hopefully
such a
not.
privilege. Yeah, right. Like, hopefully not. But such a privilege when a client's like, hey, the problem's gone and I don't need this service anymore. And I think like we really should be like looking at all of our practices like, okay, some things we do daily, right? But then other things are kind of meant to help us get to the core and solve it.
That's one of my favorite part of this job, to be honest.
Yes.
Thank you so much to speaking out loud about it, because when I was trying to help myself all around with my Lyme disease and I couldn't.
Yeah.
So first of all, I couldn't get rid of it, and I wanted to get rid of it fast.
Right.
And I was not that type of person that, okay, I'm going to go for years on the therapy, not with that urgent thing you carry, especially when it's affecting your daily life, when physically you're feeling weak. And as you described, she was able to finally feel herself. Because if people surround you cannot understand if you're living with something on a daily basis consistently, it's just super exhausting.
Right.
And your mental health is very bad, even though this lineage comes from the mental health, right? And it's outcome of it, but then it's just making it even worse, because your body is literally screaming because you are not be able to take care of it for any reason. It could be a lot of reasons, but that was my first priority, to find something to help fast in a proper way. Of course, it's not happening overnight, right? But it just, the process we can estimate. And also, I love how you said that they don't have to come back.
Yeah.
Yes, because that was also the issue of mine. Because every single practitioner I've been trying to find for myself, I wanted to feel comfortable to work with. I had this sense of, selling. Of course, I understand it's our job and everyone needs a job and things like that. But when you're doing that from the state of the need, it just showing up differently, I guess. But hypnotherapy, again, I respect every single tool, and every single therapist and kind of therapy having their own purpose. But for me personally, when I found hypnotherapy, I'm like, okay, these people are pretty confident that they can deal with that. So they don't have to even understand what you're going through, right, specifically and detailed, but they're pretty confident that it could be solved and you don't have to live with that forever, even when you're not believing in that at all because you've been
Right.
carried for a certain amount of time. So yeah, I love that, and thank you so much for touching this topic. So, and as we were talking a lot about somatic, for someone who's never done somatic work before, let's say if a person never ever work with that or inner child work, what's one thing they can do today to start coming home to their body, coming back to their body, to their center, and their own self?
Yeah. There are so many entryways to this type of work, and people could already be doing it, but maybe not realizing it. And so I think part of it is the shift into being really conscious and intentional with the work. And then part of it too is um, thinking about what it feels like to just be yourself without anyone watching, right? And one of the practices that I really like to do for inner child work is dress like my inner child. Like, what would my inner child wear? Um, what kind of outfits would they put together? And then also, just like making decisions based off of those ages. I think that's really fun. And then for somatic work, getting into ecstatic dance, getting into open dance, any kind of bilateral movement. So walking is a very somatic practice, but I think a lot of times people just like go on a walk and they don't think anything of it. So when you're going on that walk, how can you be grounded? How can you be focused on the space around you? And it is a hypnotic and somatic practice.
Mm-hmm.
But when we're just flying through life, not even thinking about anything, we're absent from that grounded and embodied experience. So it could be doing things you're already doing, but just doing it in a more intentional and embodied state. But if folks are doing those things and they aren't seeing any changes, it's looking at other types of practices that are very gentle and naturally hypnotic and naturally kind of opening that space up to the subconscious mind. Somatic work, inner child work, hypnotherapy, right? They all kind of thread through accessing the subconscious mind and giving yourself safety in the body and safety to be expressive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love how you're speaking a lot about accessible tools
Yes,
because,
absolutely.
as we discussed earlier, a lot of things seems simple, might not be, giving us an idea that it could be useful and helpful,
Mm-hmm.
but they actually are. I remember how I had a huge grief. I lost my cousin, and it was super unexpectedly. And of course, I was, allowing myself to go through it. But then eventually I found myself that, oh, this is probably already enough and I have to go outside. But I literally forgot how to go outside. So,
Right.
and I remember how I was also working with our colleague. And so he simply said, first of all, you have to go outside and walk. So, and he was just like explaining me a lot how our minds, how the brain works, and the eyes are literally the extension of our brain.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if you're working whole day, not really changing your picture in front of you, the environment, and sitting all the time, you just have to go to look further because
Mm-hmm.
it's just physiology, and you have to take care of this.
Yeah.
And he also asked me, why do you think people love sunsets a lot? Because it's just, the easiest way they can go and look far.
Right.
So, yeah, this is really great. And I think walk is also very powerful, underestimated tool.
Absolutely.
Yep, yep, yep. You also talk a lot about the morning routines for especially sensitive people. So, what does yours look like, and why does it matter? Why does it matter so much when you're a highly sensitive person doing this kind of work? Because I am so. I would like to hear as well.
Yeah. So in the morning, we are in a very similar state to when we're in hypnosis. It's like that theta brain waves right when we wake up. So we're very susceptible. We're very open to the influence of the world. And I have learned through experimenting, through being consistent, I notice the difference between when my phone is the first influence of my day and my
Mm-hmm.
morning habits are the first influence of my day. So I have created a ritual around creating space between basically accessing the rest of the world and accessing myself first. Um, so I start my day with meditation. I try to get outside to do it. Like I have a back patio at my house, or I have like a red light therapy lamp that I use. So I kind of
Mm.
balance between the two. So that's really great for inflammation and, circulation in the body. So I do meditation. I do 10 to 20 minutes, sometimes longer, of ecstatic dance. So I just dance in my room. Um, I also like to light a candle or burn incense or burn some other kind of cleansing wood to sort of bring fresh energy. Sometimes I will put on an anointing oil, or I'll put on I have a high priestess oil that I like to work with. So I really like to work with rituals that are tactile and things that I can touch and feel and smell. So I'll have the meditation piece, I'll have the ritual piece, I'll have the dance, and then I journal. And I will either journal right after I meditate, or I'll journal while I'm making and eating my breakfast as just another way to create separation between my phone, between the rest of the world. And so by this point, I've done something to move my body. I've done something to be expressive creatively, and I've done something to quiet the mind and reorganize and reorient my thoughts. And I absolutely can tell a difference between those days, between the days where I do the routine and the days that I don't. And I try to be consistent with it. I try to make it something that I can do in a short period of time and a long period of time. And it's really helpful to give yourself an anchor as a sensitive person, right? I kind of think
Mm-hmm.
of sensitive people like little sailboats, and the wind is blowing us back and forth. And sometimes the ocean waves are more intense and sometimes they aren't. And so having that anchor in the morning kind of lets us be less intensely impacted by the waves of our lives. And we're still going to have emotions. We're still going to have moments with other people, but it's not going to feel like we're being absolutely rocked by it. It's going to give us a little bit more of that groundedness. So I would say if you're a sensitive person, create a ritual around grounding yourself. It kind of goes back to what you're sharing, like sunsets and sunrises are so powerful. And I'm not quite at the point where I'm waking up with the sunset, maybe, or sunrise, maybe one day. That'll be me.
Yeah.
But, giving myself an hour before my day starts has been really like transformational.
100%. Even me, I always had priority around my work routine,
Yes.
and never had priority around slow mornings. For me, it was even sounds weird.
Yes, I
I'm
know.
like, how do I create more time in the morning? Because mornings were always challenge to me.
Right.
Back in school, college, university, I was always like, running somewhere. I
Yeah.
had this always a pretty tight discipline schedule, and
Hmm.
I never ever had even an opportunity to create it because I was like, no, I have to create more time to sleep. And then as soon as I wake up, I'm just running. And you've mentioned breakfast. Me, I don't have breakfast. It's just like my physiology, and it wasn't my priority at all. But every single detail you described throughout your morning routine actually helps, because I had this in COVID, because it was just like the world created the space
Right.
itself, for me to
Right.
try it. But then it was a time when I was going back to hectic times. And now, recently, I quit my corporate job, and I'm enjoying this phase again. And the most important point, I guess, you've highlighted is to not take your phone right away,
Yes.
because I always did that. I
Me
always
too.
did that. It was also kind of a reason why I had the employees not just in the States, but also from all around the world. And I was like, as soon as I wake up, I have to check what's going on,
Yeah.
this controller mode. And I remember how someone told me, like, you have to create slow mornings. I was like, no.
Yeah.
It was even sounds complicated, but I think is the key, and it is pretty much the way how you're set and tone the the mood for the day.
Right. Absolutely.
Yep. And also, I remember how in your social media you've mentioned it is safe to express who you truly are. So that line is everything. Was there a time when it wasn't safe for you, when your routine was different, when you're hiding parts of yourself, I would say?
Yeah. I I definitely felt afraid to be myself when I was deep in drinking, when I was, going through years in my younger lives. I would say when I was very young, I felt very expressive and I felt very creative. And as I got older and I dealt with more things, and it was around high school where I started to feel more anxious about myself and more afraid of being my full self. And I wove in and out of it in college and in post college. And so I would say it's been, a good 10, 15 years of coming back to that baseline of full expression. And I'm still learning. I'm still
Mhm.
learning that there are parts of me that are still maybe more quiet or I'm not as open. And that's the beautiful thing about the journey is there's going to be changes. There's going to be different ways that these parts of me are going to come out. I'm going to change, like our personalities change, like our day of living. Of course, there's always the root of us and there's always like our true selves. And um, but it's taken some time to come back to myself. And now I would say I am pretty honest with who I am and I'm pretty intentional with who I am. And I like to think that how I show up is a pretty accurate reflection. And there's things that I know I need to keep working on. And instead of looking at it as a chore or a bad thing, I look at it as an exciting challenge, a new process, a new experiment. And um, I think focusing less on regiment and less on obsession with the outcome and more with curiosity and compassion has been a really great shift because I might find that one of the things that I wanted to change didn't need to be changed. Maybe I just needed to approach how I felt about it differently. And so I kind of look at two different ways we can change. We can change the behavior, or we can change the way we feel about the behavior. And those are two really great points. And sometimes we need to do both. We need to change the behavior and the
Yeah.
way that we feel about it. But that's something, we work with hypnotherapy and with coaching too, is like, are you willing to change the behavior or are you willing to change the way you feel about it or both, and helping people decipher what feels most accessible at that time.
Wow. And I was wondering if those things are connected and if your purpose in any way helped you to be yourself,
Yeah,
to find
absolutely.
more yourself.
I think my purpose has been revealed to me as a vessel of accountability, but compassionate, sort of empathetic self, and someone who is very, showcases the process. I think being really honest and vulnerable with the process has been very valuable with the way that
Mhm.
I work with people. And I've shared my health experiences. I've shared my experiences with rejection and being sensitive to experience, like just things happening in my life. So I really look at it as like I'm meant to showcase it. I'm still figuring out what that looks like, whether it's the way that I work with my clients, it's the way that I show up in my marketing. A lot of my
Mhm.
content is just this is the day in the life of someone. And so, like going back to the habits, for example, that is something
Yeah.
that I have heard so much feedback from people is talking about my morning routine and like
Yeah.
how I wouldn't say I'm incredibly strict, but I am kind of strict on it. Like I've learned more and more I have to be stricter and stricter with it. And I have what I call like the bare minimum, and then I have like the full picture of it. So if I can show people that I am a expressive artist, sensitive, creative person who also needs routine and needs structure and needs space to kind of organize myself, then that means that other people can feel that way. There's a huge dissonance with the world of creatives. They don't like routine. They claim they don't like routine. They don't like discipline. They don't like habits, but those things are actually so important as an artist and as a creative entrepreneur is a very creative energy. Like you are basically being a business artist. That's how I look at it, right? You're creating something. So like we need routines as entrepreneurs, as business owners, as artists, as writers, as podcast curators, whatever that title is. It is an inherently creative process. And while there is value in spontaneity and impulse and just following your creative desire, if there's no consistency, if there's no sort of space to recognize the progress, and it just kind of feels like you're throwing things into the world and there's no feedback. So I really do reiterate the value of ritual and habit as part of a creative journey. And again, it doesn't have to be rigid, but it needs to be consistent in some capacity. So that's very much part of my calling, is to help people see that and see the value in that.
100% agree. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm pretty sure it didn't come up in one day, and there's huge work behind it. I know that myself as well.
Yeah.
And people are thinking when you're just showing it, you're naturally was always like that. I remember how I was drinking celery juice every day, and people were thinking that was by the choice. And I was like, I love that so much. I'm like, yes, after a while, when you see already improvements, it's just like necessarily like part of your life, right? But when you're just starting, you're just dealing with yourself, right? Trying to sell this idea, and it's not really easy. And thank you so much for reminding how important to show to others and encourage others, you know, the importance of that. And yeah, discipline is everything. But what would you say to that previous version of you who was just starting? So to realize something needed to change, but was scared to begin?
I would definitely tell her to let go of expectations and to keep going and to see it through and to be open to things unfolding in different ways. I think that's something where some of my behavior was around, you know, fear of being seen, and parts of my behaviors were needing to control the outcome and then controlling in a self-sabotaging or like a destructive way. So I think learning where I have control and where I don't has been a really powerful practice, right? The co-creation with the universe, co-creation with community. So I would definitely remind that early version of myself to just keep an optimistic and open mind, and to listen deeply, and to give myself space to listen deeply as well.
Thank you. I think it would help a lot for the viewers. And let's say if someone is watching this and something in them is quietly saying, I think I need this kind of healing, I'm recognizing myself a lot in that. What do you want them to know first?
Yeah, I think the first thing that is really part of this process is permission to be honest, and like not the fun stuff and the fun stuff, but like permission to be honest, permission to, you know, work with the shadow self, permission to be upset, and permission to want more. I think we often subconscious mind rationale, right? We rationale with ourselves, or we try to tell ourselves that this is all we're going to get, or this is the best it's going to get. This is how, I'm sure you've heard clients say this too, where they're like, this is just the way I am. No, 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 no. This is the way you have been, but it doesn't mean this is the way you have to be forever. So I would say if someone is resonating with this conversation that we're having, start with that honest assessment. Are you happy with your activities? Are you happy with your life? And maybe you are happy with part of it, but there's a part of you that wants more in front of them, in front of you. So that's definitely step one, is the honesty with the self. And then I think step two is being open to the impulse and the messages, just like how we both shared how it was kind of just an impulse of, oh, I should pursue this thing, or I should work with this type of person, or I should take this certification, or I should quit this job. And so I think just listening to those downloads and welcoming them, even if they don't quite make a lot of sense.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing everything, and thank you so much for this beautiful conversation.
Yes.
I really enjoyed that. And I was wondering how people can find you, to work with you, to connect, to attend one of your workshops and things like that.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for holding this space. This was so much fun. And I love that our stories had such beautiful connection and similarities. The best way to connect with me would be either on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, or my website. Fortunately, all of my handles are really similar. They're basically jennaborrelli.life or jenna.borrelli.life. Fortunately, I have very good SEO with my name. So if you go on Google and you search Jenna Borrelli Life, you'll be able to find my information.
Marketing person, right?
Yes, yes, good SEO, right?
Right. I can tell that. So yeah, of course, I'll put all of this information below in the description. You can find it below this video. Please subscribe, as more podcasts are coming up. So please go ahead and find Jenna in her social media, follow her, connect. Please share your thoughts with us below in the comments. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Jenna, for being my guest. And until next time.
Thank you so much.